Welcome to the Healing Circle podcast. I am Lauren Zakia.
I am E. Nicole.
And I'm Jessa Ray.
And we are faculty and fellows at InPower Institute, a center for community healing and optimal living.
Our series marks the 400th anniversary of the first Africans who arrived as captives.
So today we will center our discussion around the theme of 400 years to reunite. So over our time, many bonds have been formed which have held us together in the most turbulent of times. So from our shipmates to our plantation mates back in the day, and also our village or community mates. These were the ones who shared in our suffering. And even though we have become more technologically advanced, many are suffering in silence still. Through loneliness, isolation, and just honestly through a loss of connection or even how to connect. So what we'd like to start off with today, Lauren and Jessa Ray, how have we become disconnected from our communities? How has this all happened?
Well, I think about the cost of integration.
Girl, no, you didn't start off with that. The episode over.
So I grew up in Baldwin. My parents, who both lived in the city as children, decided to purchase a home in Baldwin, Missouri. And so that's where I spent my entire childhood. And I remember, although I did dance, so I danced with a Black Academy, and I still went to my Black home church, which were both in the city. It was like I felt amongst family only on the weekends. So during the week, we were out in Baldwin, kind of isolated from everybody. And in my parents' attempt to provide more, have more opportunities for their children, they end up moving in a white neighborhood, which was not welcoming. So many stories of when I was younger and adults and children both in my neighborhood on the bus who tormented us. Well, tormented me. I'm sure my brother and sister also have experience, but I'm thinking about me specifically. And so I always, as a child, felt like I was, I felt alone from my people. Even though I didn't have the words to articulate that, I felt like I wasn't Black enough because I did not have the Black experience as though I thought I should, which was one of the reasons why I went to HBCU. But I felt disconnected is really what I felt, because even though there may have been more academic opportunity, these were not my people. And they made it very known that they were not my people.
Yeah.
So integration, to my point, like the cost of integration, black people laid down their places of where they grew up and maybe some of the businesses that they created because they thought they would have more opportunities if they were to but assimilate into white culture.
That is deep to kick us off. I was literally speaking to someone yesterday about how the DSEC program failed in St. Louis. Yeah. But that is a rabbit hole, a personal rabbit hole for me. So I will not get into that. But I can definitely understand that my parents were completely against the DSEC program. My father is from St. Louis, grew up in the Blue. That's the Blue Meyer Projects, for those not familiar. My mother is from 5th Ward in Houston, so we are very much inner city people. And even with that, there has been like some strife even from being from the inner city, because you don't always connect with your neighbors like you think you should, even though you're all growing up in the same type of area. But listening to just E's intro, it brought to mind the term fictive kinship. Mm-hmm. So these people who you're not related to, but you're sharing these times with, these are now your new family. And that sounds like something that you were missing when you were going to school out in Baldwin. You didn't have that fictive kinship. You had to cobble that for yourself as you got older. Mm-hmm. And I would say that we've become disconnected from our communities in light of all of this advancement in education that we've had. We've kind of put ourselves in these little cyclones. We've all worked in the public or been in the public, and we've gotten to a point you can't even look at somebody sometimes without it being an issue. Like, I might want to compliment you, but now you ready to fight because I glanced at you for 10 seconds too long. Mm-hmm. And don't let you have a child. And that whole concept of it taking a village has taken a complete backseat, if not thrown out of the car altogether. Mm-hmm. I worked in a place where children were there all the time, and I know some people did not like it, but if your child is running around and aggravating me, I know it's aggravating you. I don't have the mommy patience. So if Tyrell is really cutting up, Tyrell got to sit down. And I don't mind, like, hey, you're going to have to sit on the floor until your mama is done handling business. Sometimes that was not received with the intent that I put it out there as. Like, I'm not trying to be you. I did not birth this child, but this is my child. Because if something happens to him, that is my business. Because we're all each other's business. But I think that has been lost with us growing and changing and moving and integrating and assimilating into these different cultures.
Woo. Okay, we are going here today. So I wrote down a lot while y'all were talking about as far as schooling, because schooling is definitely, I mean, shoot, if you are able to infect and inject bullshit through minds, then, you know, we could take religion has done it, education has done it. It's two very powerful systems, right? Mm-hmm. And so definitely, I can relate to feelings that both of y'all have spoken on, and everything from, man, like, when I started off school, I actually attended, like, preschool was a different story. It was probably a blend, but I just don't remember that much of it. But definitely I started off grade school in Kinloch, so surrounded by all black folks. And then as that school in that area lost funding, having to attend, I attended private school all throughout my education, and then having to go and be in like all white spaces, and then to a point of feeling, even though my family was really strong in blackness, I definitely felt almost an imposter in both worlds at a certain point. Of being an outcast, definitely in the all-white spaces, unless they, of course, cheer me on for sports. That's a whole other episode. Or then feeling like, because I didn't get the community learning up to a certain age, when I started going to those other schools, feeling like, dang, I don't know how to braid hair. I feel like, is that a rites of passage? I don't know how to do that myself. I'm only good at turning on double dutch.
I felt like that too.
Not good at actually jumping in it, and and so like I don't like pickles with peppermint.
I do like that.
Right.
I learned that from my city cousins, but I did not learn how to double dutch.
And so, like, some definitely key things. Not that that's like the whole like definition of it all, but there's definitely some key things. But what I'd rather kind of pull out here, as far as how have we come, and so like method, man, I think about language. As a way that we've become disconnected from our communities. And so, sure, absolutely, we were forbidden, when 400 years ago, we were forbidden for speaking our language, from our names, and then holding the meaning to it now, like the name, like, what the hell does a lot of this stuff, the names even mean? And like the names that we were forced to have. But also the language, and then now, even since having to speak English, then the language that like Black folks, and whether it's Ebonics or like some other things, is seen as like that's not talking proper. And so even within our own communities, even further separating within Black communities of who talks this English, who talks that English, and having a hierarchy even within, as a way that definitely has, as we navigate safety, as we navigate access to resources, language along with education has been a huge tool for disconnection, but likewise, I feel like in some ways it becomes a tool for reconnection when you got that. If you and the other person, the Black woman, the only Black people in the whole department, some specific language that can be used, that all y'all got to do, from body language to verbal language, that'll get you right back reconnected with the hood, or the sisterhood, you know? The sisterhood. So yeah, I was wondering here if y'all also had experiences or memories of how language too has disconnected our communities.
Oh, totally. So my mother did not really want us to use slang in the household. So despite us growing up very much inner city kids, we would sound so much different than even our cousins, and not even speaking about our neighbors. So sometimes it felt like we were operating or living inside our own little bubble, and so we would come out. We didn't play outside a lot with the neighborhood kids. So it was kind of like rotating in completely different worlds. Like, this is your familial world. Like, you hang with your siblings, and then we'll take you over to your cousin's house, and you go to school. And you do whatever you do at school. But then you come back home, like, you don't really talk to these kids. And at times I was like, well, I want to see what my neighbor kids are doing. And it's like my parents had already scoped the scene. They was like, they ain't doing shit. Come on back in this house. You got this homework to do. And I think language kind of breaks that up, because we so often hear like, you talk like a white girl or like a white boy. And it's really like, no, I just know the English language. This is what was taught to me. This was how I was taught to pronounce these words. But even with that, as I've gotten older and had to do my own re-education, I had to pull back, because I was quick to correct somebody. Honey, like, I'm your English teacher. On Facebook, I got my red pen out. But I had to pull back, because I was like, that's me oppressing my own people. Yep. And okay, so you don't know homophones, you don't know homonyms. Okay, I'm gonna let you live, because maybe you weren't thinking about that in the 3rd grade. You don't know there, and there. Okay, I'm gonna just swallow that pill and keep scrolling. But I think that is one of those disconnects with language. Like, having to extend grace. Like, we're in St. Louis, so people like to rely on that heavy and those long consonants and skipping out words and sentences. You just got to go. You just have to, okay, I got it from context clues. Thank you.
Yeah, that's real. That's real, of the balance between, like, I too have found myself fighting for the King's language, right? And then to a point of then realizing that wasn't my damn king. And so it's like, damn, like, so-and-so and these people over here getting made fun of. Maybe back in the day, they people fought harder to say, fuck you in your language. I'm thinking about, a lot of times within my family, definitely grandmother who born in the 1920s, ended up with 2 master's degrees and all this other stuff. Definitely all she was in was all white spaces. And so I just think about of making sure to not even feel like, that I'm too good, just because maybe for me, I feel like my family in some ways got further conditioned, and that's a detriment. Even though it may have helped in the immediate to go along with mainstream, to go along with European law and Eurocentric values, I just think about the disconnection in terms of language in that way.
Yeah, that kind of goes with the next question, which is what has been the cost of progress?
Bingo.
I would say that it costs connection. Speaking directly to this, like, we're now in a space where people have to find their own kin, because sometimes even those blood related to you do not see things the way that you see them, but you find your tribe other places. And I think that can cost people emotionally and mentally, that sometimes you have to push away from those you thought you would be connected to in various ways forever. But I think that is a necessary cost of progress. I do feel like liberation is for everyone, but not everyone will be liberated. And so I can't force you to do as I do or to think as I think. But whenever you're ready, you know, I got your spirit, you know. So I think that's one of the cost of progress, is sometimes we have to break our own innate bonds and recreate new ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think with progress, there's a sense of identity and maybe culture that is lost if we have bought into the systems that of white supremacy, patriarchy, imperialism, like all of those things that say this is what success looks like. And in order to be successful, you must align yourself in these ideals and these practices. And so then people start to identify themselves based on what they acquire and how success shows up in their life. That they may have, it's a inflated self, but also a inauthentic self. When you are living your life based on what someone else has defined for you, rather than you define for yourself what it is to be a human being living in this era. So if you aren't intentional about being true to who you are, then all of these systems and conditions can influence you to be unrecognizable to maybe those around you and those who are depending on you.
Yeah, I really actually don't have much to add to that. I actually fully feel like, that y'all captured it. I guess, like, something that I was just thinking about upon hearing the question is that part of the cost is that we also have different definitions of what progress is. And so I can just, if I'm thinking like we had a room instead of 3 people, but a room with 30, how differently, looking at the cost of progress, how differently that can be answered. Because we might end up talking about a few different things. So that was really my biggest takeaway of thinking about, okay, well, how are you defining progress? How are you defining cost? But how are you defining progress? And because when I think about as far as community progress, well, that also is dependent upon the people within that community having the same idea of what progress is. So that's just,
I would agree,
what came to me.
And I think to go into our last question is, how do we recognize our kinfolks and our need for a reunion? I would say one of the ways to recognize them has been with the addition of technology. Like, Black Twitter is a strong and mighty force. And it is so interesting that we all have these shared experiences, but we do not know one another. I feel like that is the best example of fictive kinship that one can draw from. Like, just the memes that are created, and then they get so many likes, and I had that same experience. Like, we all know about taking that meat out for dinner and not doing it in enough time, and so now you're trying to hurry up because mama is coming up the street. And for those who are not, active on social media, I think when you are in the workplace, like you mentioned, and you see that, the chocolate chip and the cookie, or I like to say flying the buttermilk, but
flying the buttermilk. Okay.
When you see them, it's that innate pulling, like you feel like you can trust them. Sometimes they cannot be trusted, but you see them like, oh, that's kinfolk. I can go in there and we can, chop it up and then get back to work. And then for a need of a reunion, I think when you are feeling isolated in your Blackness, when you feel like you do not have a community, you have no one to lean on, I think that is when you know that it's time that you got to find somebody. If it's not a face-to-face, you need a phone call. You need to send up a flare, a carrier pigeon, something. Just get here. Yeah.
Not you clapping pigeons.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm also thinking about like the different identities, right? Even within like somebody, I'll take myself for example, who's Black, who's also, of a certain socioeconomic, status or whatever, but also who's also queer. And also not currently affiliated with any type of, I guess we will say traditional religious affiliation. And so recognizing kinfolks, definitely for me goes beyond seeing Black skin. It's with that, and then it's also in the work that one does for themselves and also for the community. Because, like as Desiree just mentioned, like you can definitely, just spotting the fly in the buttermilk, who's also the chocolate chip on the cookie, may not always, result in you getting the community and sense of reunion that perhaps you were looking for. Because definitely can think of some instances of a black face, white mind. And so for me, it's certain notions. Sometimes, like I said, going back to that nonverbal, it's some shit that you and some other folks would just peep, and then y'all connect. Just like sometimes you don't even have to talk, and it's like that. But it's also going into the community and the folks who are aligned with the work that you are seeking to be involved with, or maybe the work that you are needing. And so I think it's, going back to a couple, episodes ago of some of the key things, how to identify like strong Black women in the community, that ends up joining us together. I think a lot of those attributes and values and everything like that, like definitely go into further recognizing the kinfolk. So y'all have to go back and listen to that episode. But yeah, it's just like so much that goes into it, even beyond the skin of the kin.
Yeah. Well, I would say my reunion had to be first with myself. I am learning so much more about who I am, more than I knew, because I have been embracing myself more, and I have been aware of the ways in which previous experiences sought to kind of pull some of those things out of me, those things that really were essential to me. And by that I mean, like, I didn't realize how strong of a personality and how passionate I was until I was an adult, because I think one of the ways in which maybe family tried to keep me safe was to keep me quiet. And so I was very quiet as a child, very quiet in high school, and as a late bloomer. And now I have so much personality, which was probably always there, but it was just, it wasn't allowed to really blossom and bloom. So I had to reunite with myself first. And as I have done my own work of healing, and that's a continuous journey, but also as I've really started to love myself, I've been able to form like very deep bonds with other people because I can be my full self, and I am unashamed of who my full self is. So I think the reunion, my experience has been for me, and I have found my kin. The more I embrace my authentic self, the more I'm able to embrace other people.
I would completely agree with that. Totally. I think that's one of the specific ways that we can recognize our kinfolk, those who can accept you as you are, where you are, and that can extend grace when needed. I feel like I may have had like the opposite. Like they never told me to be quiet. It was very much so. Like out of 6 siblings, I'm like, I'll speak for everybody. Like, where we going? What we finna do? You know, but I also mother everybody if need be. And I always, my mother will bring up like stories of me standing up for myself even as a young child. And so I look for that when I am out in public. I love to see children standing up for themselves.
Yeah.
Like I completely respect autonomy when it comes to youth. You don't have to hug me. You don't have to touch me.
Yeah.
Nothing. Like I completely adore that, and I feel like that's when you know that you find your tribe. And in even saying that, we invite you to come to InPower and find your tribe. You know, come and get from this source what you need. Yeah,
that was great.
Yeah, all I got is word. Just word. Come to InPower, absolutely. Yeah. Look for opportunities of when we actually travel and connect with people throughout the diaspora, and all of that. I guess since I'm talking, I'll go ahead and say,
do the benediction. Go ahead and do the benediction.
So just thank you for joining us. And please, if you haven't yet, go in. If this is your first episode, you need to go back and get caught up and listen to the rest of them. Other than that, you can definitely connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at InPower Institute. I will not try to rap it this time. Look at the last episode for that one. It's InPowerInstitute. Visit our website, empowerinstitute.com, for more information.
Thanks for joining us, y'all.
Bye.